My name is Violet Matthews. I'm 31 years old and I live in a two-story Cape Cod-style home in the suburbs of Connecticut. From the outside, people envy my life. A successful husband, a peaceful home lined with maple trees, and family photos filled with smiles neatly framed on the living room wall. But if you've ever seen how I flinch when someone walks too quickly toward me, or how my eyes dodge questions about work, you'd realize that picture-perfect life is just a glossy coat of paint over a door that's slowly rotting. My husband, Richard, 38, is the kind of man people respect. He owns a real estate company, speaks eloquently, and knows how to make others feel important. At parties or charity events, he'd always keep his arm around me like the perfect accessory. Just flashy enough to show off, and just replaceable enough to remind me of my place. I used to think I was lucky. I met him when I was 24, freshly out of college, full of hope, and convinced that love could heal anything. Richard made me feel seen. He noticed every word I said, every detail of my outfit, and made me believe that he was the only one who truly saw me for who I was. But that attention slowly turned into control. Gentle comments about my friends turned into orders to stay away from them. Financial advice led me to quit my job as an interior designer. At some point, I stopped going anywhere alone. Even grocery trips had to be cleared with him. He always just wanted to make sure I was safe. That's how he put it. I started wearing long sleeves year-round, even when it was over 90 degrees. When people asked, I'd laugh it off with, "I burn easily." But the truth was different. Some mornings I'd look in the mirror and not recognize myself. Some nights I'd lie still, afraid to turn over in bed for fear of waking him and hearing, once again, how I was disrupting his sleep. I once tried to speak up. Just once, last year. I told Richard I wanted to go back to my old job, just part-time. He sat on the couch in silence for a long while, then smiled. But behind that smile was something cold, like steel. "You really think they'd hire you for your talent?" he asked softly. "Or just because you're my wife?" I didn't answer. I didn't dare. From that moment, I understood that every suggestion needed approval, and every refusal carried a warning. I learned to be silent. I cleaned the house the way he liked, arranged flowers in his favorite colors, memorized every detail of his meetings like it was my life's duty. When people visited, I played the perfect hostess, smiling on cue, telling just enough pleasant stories, but no one ever asked how I was doing. They only complimented the house, said Richard was lucky to have such a capable wife. They didn't see the way my eyes stayed hidden beneath my bangs. They didn't notice the times I stood by the window, wondering whether I was really living, or just playing out a role I never auditioned for. There's one thing I know for sure. I forgot the sound of my own real voice. Not the forced laughter, not the familiar "I'm fine," but the voice of a woman who used to dream, who believed in the future, who once debated her brother about everything from music to philosophy. Now I live in silence, wrapped in beige curtains and polished oak. A life flawless on the surface, but fractured beneath. On Friday evening, I set the table for 4, just like I'd promised Richard 3 weeks ago. My brother Ethan was coming, along with his wife Samantha. The last time we saw each other was Thanksgiving last year, but it was crowded and Ethan had to leave early when his son got sick. I still remember his eyes when he hugged me goodbye, warm but searching. Ethan is 5 years older than me. Growing up, he was the one who taught me how to ride a bike and hid me in the closet when I broke Mom's antique vase. But since I got married, our relationship has become polite. He rarely called, and I always found excuses not to visit. Richard came into the kitchen as I was straightening the table linens. "Smile, Violet," he said, voice light as air yet cold enough to make me stand straighter. "If your brother sees you looking like a ghost, he's gonna worry." I forced a smile. "I'm just a little tired." Then don't let them notice, he winked, brushing my hair aside like I was a doll on a shelf. The doorbell rang at exactly 6:30, right on time. Ethan looked just the same, neat, calm, in a blue plaid shirt and khakis. He gave me a tight hug long enough to make my throat tighten. "Still skinny, I see," he joked, then stepped inside. Samantha followed with a bouquet of sunflowers. Elegant, poised, a little distant. We were never close, but I never blamed her. I hadn't exactly let anyone get close. Richard transformed into the perfect man in seconds. He poured red wine, told stories about a big new client, and charmed everyone so well I almost believed his performance myself. I just quietly served soup, poured water, and avoided Ethan's gaze when I reached for a napkin. Then, for a single second, my sleeve slipped. The bruise on my wrist, yellowing now, peeked through. I pulled the sleeve back quickly, but I knew Ethan had seen it. His expression changed, even if just for a moment. He looked at me, really looked, but said nothing. Then he turned back to Richard and resumed talking about real estate in Florida. But I saw it clearly. That moment left a crack in the steady gaze he'd always had. When dinner ended, Ethan hugged me again. This time he whispered so softly I barely caught it. "Take care of yourself, Vi." Just 4 simple words, but they froze me in the doorway as they left. Richard closed the door, whistling cheerfully. "See? Told you, everything's fine." No one suspected a thing. I didn't respond. Inside me, something stirred, like the ripple of a wave. Around midnight, while Richard was asleep on the sofa, I was tidying up when I heard a knock at the door. Not frantic, not rushed, just 3 steady taps. I held my breath. My fingers clenched the dish towel and I instinctively stepped back. But then I saw a shadow through the curtain. It was Ethan. I opened the door slowly. He didn't say a word, just stepped inside, his eyes shining with something I dared not name. Anger. And worry. "Where's Richard?" he asked in a low voice. "He's asleep," I replied softly, heart pounding. "Why did you come back?" "For you. I couldn't sleep after what I saw on your wrist." Ethan looked me straight in the eye. "Vi, how long has this been happening?" I didn't answer right away. That question, simple, direct, was something I'd waited years to hear. But when it finally came, my throat tightened. "It's not something you need to worry about." I tried to stay composed. "Then who will worry about you if not me?" Ethan's voice cracked. "You think I didn't notice? The way you kept your head down, how you avoided Richard's gaze, that smile that isn't really a smile. Violet, you're not yourself anymore." I trembled and leaned against the wall, the towel falling from my hand. "I don't even know where to start." "Start with the truth." Ethan stepped closer, his tone gentle. "With yourself. You don't have to explain everything. Just nod if you're in danger." I looked at him. His eyes never left mine. Then I nodded. Ethan closed his eyes for a brief second, as if holding back something powerful inside. "I'll be back tomorrow," he said. "Not alone. There's someone I want you to meet. Someone who can help." "Richard will find out," I whispered, panicked. "I'll handle that. You just need to trust me." Ethan placed his hand on my shoulder, firm but kind. "This time, I'm not going anywhere. I won't stay silent." Then he left, leaving me standing alone in the hallway, my heart pounding out of my chest. And yet, for the first time in years, I felt something unfamiliar, but strangely comforting. Aiden. Hope. The next morning, I woke earlier than usual. The sky outside the window was still foggy and traffic sounds were sparse. Richard had left the house at 6 o'clock for a meeting with an investment group from Boston. Before leaving, he left a handwritten note. "Don't forget to water the plants and check the mailbox, and please stop being so forgetful." I stared at the note for a long time. Just a few lines, but they carried the weight of a storm pressing against my chest. I knew it wasn't a reminder, it was a warning. By 9 o'clock, Ethan returned, just as he promised, but this time he wasn't alone. The woman with him had silver-streaked hair tied back neatly, wearing a plain cotton blouse and simple khaki pants. She didn't carry a designer handbag or wear the rushed expression of women I'd met at Richard's events, but her eyes? Something about her gaze made me feel truly seen. "Violet," Ethan said gently, "this is Clara Jennings. She runs an organization that supports women in difficult marriages. No obligations, no pressure, just a conversation." Clara didn't offer a handshake or step too close. She just nodded softly. "I'll only speak when you feel ready. Is there somewhere quiet we can sit?" I led them to the dining room, where the scent of last night's cookies still lingered. My hands trembled slightly as I poured the tea, but I didn't hide it this time. I set the teapot down and looked Clara in the eyes. I used to think, if I stayed quiet, he'd stop. My voice cracked. But he didn't. He just got better at hiding it. Clara nodded without interrupting. "It started with comments," I continued, "saying I was incompetent, that I was lucky he loved me, that I'd be nothing without him. Then came the tight grips, the things thrown, and then other things." I lowered my head. The memories rushed back like icy waves. "How long has it been?" Ethan asked, his voice strained. "Since we got married," I answered. 5 years, but maybe it started even earlier. It just took me too long to realize." Silence hung in the room for a few seconds. Clara spoke gently. "Violet, what you're going through is not your fault. It is never the fault of the one being hurt. You've been incredibly strong to endure it alone all these years. But now, you don't have to be alone anymore." I let out a dry laugh. "I have no money, no car. This house is in Richard's name. Even the phone I use, he bought it. If I leave, I'll have nothing." Clara didn't waver. "We have a network of safe houses across the state. We offer legal help, financial assistance, and most importantly, a space where women like you can rebuild their lives. Safely." I shook my head. "He knows people in the local police, has friends in the bank, connections I can't even imagine. If he finds out I'm trying to leave, he won't let it go." Ethan clenched his hands on the table. "I won't let that happen. I can't undo the past, but I can do right from now on." Clara slowly pulled a small phone from her pocket. "This is a disposable phone. It can't be tracked. Keep it. If anything happens, or if you're ready, just send one word, Echo. We'll know what to do." I held it in my hand. It felt light, just an object. But in my world right now, it was the first life raft I'd ever had. "No one is forcing you to go today," Clara added. "The choice is yours. But don't believe you have no way out. You do." I looked at Ethan, then at Clara. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was talking to strangers. I felt maybe, just maybe, I wouldn't be trapped forever behind these ivory-painted walls. "I'll think about it," I said softly. "I need time." "You have time," Clara smiled. "But remember, people like Richard, they only stay quiet when they think they've already won." After they left, I stood by the window for a long time, the small phone resting in my palm like a secret that could change my entire life. I hadn't pressed the button yet, but I knew I would, soon. 2 days after the conversation with Clara, I still hadn't sent the message. The disposable phone was hidden deep in the bottom drawer, tucked between old notebooks Richard never cared about. I knew I was hesitating, but I couldn't force myself to take another step while fear still clung to my mind like fog. That night, while Richard was out having dinner with a group of investors, I took a moment to breathe. I made a cup of tea, turned on soft music, and sat alone under the warm glow of the kitchen light. It was one of those rare moments when I could relax my shoulders and breathe without being on guard. The doorbell rang suddenly, making my heart skip. I quickly checked the security camera. It was Samantha. She stood there, arms crossed, makeup flawless, but her expression cold as stone. I hesitated before opening the door. "We need to talk," she said bluntly, then walked in like she owned the place. I closed the door, trying to stay calm. "Richard's not home." "I know," Samantha replied, turning to face me. "I'm here because of Ethan. And you." I blinked. "Is something wrong?" She curled her lips, not a smile, but like she was holding back irritation. "Lately, Ethan's been acting crazy. Out early, home late, hiding his phone and spending way too much time on you." I blinked again. "I don't understand." "Don't play dumb, Violet," Samantha snapped, her voice sharp. "I know Ethan came back to your house that night. I know he brought some woman named Clara with him." I froze. So much for keeping things discreet. "I didn't pull anyone into this. Ethan's just worried about me, as a brother." "A brother?" Samantha laughed. A harsh metallic sound. "Please. You've always known how to make men protect you. Ever since you were little, you were the fragile one the whole family revolved around, and now you want to wreck my marriage too?" Her accusation cut deep. "I never—" "Samantha, I'm hurt. Richard, I know Richard has a temper," Samantha interrupted. "He's known for being difficult, but that doesn't make him a bad guy. And you? You're always so helpless, so breakable. But you know what? The weakest ones are often the best at playing the victim." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Are you saying I made it all up?" "No need to imagine," she shrugged. "I just think if you were really being abused, you would have left a long time ago. But you stayed. You endured it. That says everything." I took a step back, my palms suddenly ice cold. "Because I was scared." "Scared? Or scared of losing the pity?" Samantha raised an eyebrow. "Ethan is a kind man. He wants to save anyone in pain. But don't think you can keep pulling him in forever. I won't let you destroy my family." I wanted to scream, to fight back, but my throat felt like it was clamped shut. All these years of learning to be silent, and now I didn't know what to do when someone blamed me for my own pain. Samantha stepped closer, her voice dropping but her gaze still sharp as a blade. "I talked to Richard. I warned him that you've seemed off lately, that you might do something drastic. He should be prepared." I reeled. You called him?" "Of course. I'm not going to stand by and watch a devoted husband like Richard get slandered by his own wife." Samantha turned on her heel and walked to the door. "If you're smart, you'll stop now. Don't drag Ethan down with your delusions." The door shut behind her, leaving me standing there, stunned like I'd been thrown out of my own life. My chest tightened. My throat went dry. The one person I thought might understand? My brother's wife was the first to betray me in the cruelest way. Not only did she refuse to protect me, she warned Richard, turning me into a threat in my own husband's eyes. I walked back to the kitchen, hands trembling as I opened the drawer. The disposable phone was still there, its tiny light blinking. I stared at the keypad. Echo. Just one word, one message, one chance. I didn't press send. But this time, I didn't hide it away again. I left it on the table, ready. That night, after Samantha left, I couldn't sleep. Every small sound in the house made me jump. I knew, after Samantha's call, Richard would change, and not in a good way. He'd be suspicious, he'd be cautious, and maybe he'd strike first. I sat in the bathroom, the only place Richard never entered without a reason. I took the disposable phone from the drawer and texted Clara a single word. Echo. The message sent at 2:17 a.m. Exactly 3 minutes later, a reply came through. Received. Stay calm. We're moving. I didn't know what I felt at that moment. A mix of relief and fear. I had pushed the boat offshore, but the sea ahead was vast and stormy. The next morning, Richard acted differently. He didn't yell, didn't snap. Instead, he brought me my favorite morning coffee, handed me a bouquet of purple tulips, the flower I'd said I liked 3 years ago. "I'm sorry if things have been tense lately," he said, gently brushing my hair. "Work's been stressful. How about we get away this weekend? That cabin in the mountains you once mentioned." The cabin. No neighbors, no cell signal. No one would know we were there. My heart nearly stopped. That wasn't an invitation. It was a trap. "Great idea," I smiled, keeping my voice steady. "I'll pack our things." As soon as he left the house, I called Clara using another phone she had given me earlier. Ethan was with her. His voice was taut like a drawn wire. "We're not letting you go there," Ethan said. "Clara has a plan." A few hours later, we met at a small cafe tucked behind the town library, a safe place. Sitting with them was a man in a gray button-down shirt, wearing glasses, who introduced himself briefly. "I'm a federal investigator. Name's Mark Reynolds." Clara spoke next. "He's been tracking Richard's financial activities for the past 6 months, and you could help." I furrowed my brow. "Me?" Mark nodded. "We suspect Richard is involved in laundering money through his chain of companies. But we don't yet have direct evidence. If you can access certain documents or devices, we might be able to bring this to an end much faster." I thought of the laptop Richard always left in his study. He never bothered locking it. He thought I wasn't capable of anything beyond emailing old friends. "He has a folder named Wharton Capital. It's the shell company," I said. "I'll find a way to access it." "Be careful," Ethan warned. "Once Richard gets suspicious, he can react fast." "I've lived under suspicion for 5 years," I replied, locking eyes with him. "This time, I strike first." That evening, while Richard was in the shower, I slipped into his office. The laptop was still on. I sat down, took a deep breath, and opened the Wharton Capital folder. Inside were spreadsheets, wire transfer reports, and, most importantly, a forged contract signed by someone who had been dead for 3 years. I took photos of every file using the disposable phone, then sent them to Clara via the encrypted app. She messaged back, "Perfect. Phase 2 begins." From that day forward, I started documenting everything. The tone shifts in Richard's voice, the look he gave me when he suspected I was lying, the words that numbed me emotionally. I installed a hidden recording app in my smartwatch and began saving daily conversations. I photographed every new bruise before it faded. I rewrote my journal like a diet log, something Richard would never bother to read. The next phase of the plan was to arrange a sting operation, but for that to happen, Richard had to make a mistake. In front of witnesses. "Friday night," Mark said over the phone. "He wants to take you to the cabin, right? We'll be stationed nearby. But to reduce risk, we need to make sure he stays at the house." Clara chimed in. "We can stage a situation that forces him to come back at a set time. That's when everyone will be in position." I sighed. There's only one thing left for me to do. Keep playing the obedient wife until the final second. Mark asked, "Are you sure?" I looked out the window. The sky was darkening with rain clouds. I placed a hand over my chest, feeling a heartbeat that no longer trembled. "It's not about being sure anymore," I said. "I've waited for this moment too long." Friday. The sky looked like it was about to pour, thick clouds rolling in low. Richard left the office earlier than usual. When he walked through the door, a brown leather duffel bag slung over his shoulder, I was standing in the kitchen, slicing bread with a smile. "Are you ready?" he asked. His voice unusually soft. "Just a few more things," I replied, setting the knife down. "I'm packing an extra coat. Looks chilly out." Richard scanned the room, his eyes gliding over every corner like he was checking for anything out of place. "Did you call anyone today?" I shook my head. "Just texted Mom about the weekend." He smiled, but there wasn't a shred of warmth in his eyes. "Good. We need a little privacy." 3:15 p.m. showtime. I stepped outside, pretending to check the back door, and spotted Ethan's car parked a few houses down. He gave a brief signal. I nodded. Barely noticeable. Everything was in place. Back in the living room, I picked up the fake travel bag. It held only a few old clothes, not real luggage. The real bag, containing documents, cash, and recording devices, had been picked up by Clara the night before. "Let me carry that," Richard said, walking over. "You look tired." I nodded. "Probably just stress from the week. Getting away will help." As he stepped out the front door, Mark Reynolds, the federal financial investigator, emerged from the side of the house. "Richard Blake!" he called out loudly. "I have a warrant for your arrest on charges of financial fraud and systematic abuse." Richard spun around, face draining of color. "What is this? Who are you?" "Mark Reynolds, Federal Bureau of Investigation. We've been tracking you for 8 months. We have sufficient evidence you used Wharton Capital to launder money through multiple personal accounts." I stepped out behind Richard, holding up my phone and playing the latest audio recording, his yelling, objects being thrown, and threats spoken in his own voice. "I've got some evidence too," I said, my voice steady for the first time. "Violet!" he roared, his expression twisting instantly. "You set me up?" Before he could lunge, Ethan stepped between us. "She's not alone anymore." Richard thrashed, struggled, but Mark and 2 other officers restrained him. "You have the right to remain silent," Mark began, reading him his rights, while I just stood there, breathing hard, unsure if it was from panic or relief. As soon as Richard was taken away, a silver-gray car screeched to a stop in front of the house. Samantha stormed out, eyes red, her face etched with fury. "What the hell is going on?" she shouted. "Ethan, have you lost your mind? Arresting Richard in broad daylight? Having abused my sister for 5 years and embezzled millions of dollars from his company. That's more than enough reason." Ethan replied, his voice like steel. Samantha turned to me, lips trembling. "This is all your fault. You destroyed everything. My family, my marriage." I looked at her, fear no longer in my eyes. "Nothing breaks unless it was already cracked. You've always needed to be the center. Always demanding attention. Always making people feel guilty for not bowing to you," Samantha hissed. Ethan stepped forward, placing a hand on my shoulder. "No one has to bow to anyone. But if I have to choose between my wife and my sister, today I chose. And I won't be changing that." Samantha recoiled as if slapped. "You're choosing the one who ruined everything?" "No," Ethan said. "I'm choosing the one who dared to tell the truth." No one said another word. Samantha turned on her heel, stormed back to her car, and sped off, leaving behind a trail of dust and unspent rage. I turned back to the house behind me. It had once been a home, once a spiritual tomb, once a cage, but now it was nothing. Just walls that had witnessed too much but could never speak. Clara approached and took my hand. "The car's waiting. Let's go before the press shows up." I nodded. "I'm ready." Ethan hugged me. For the first time in years, not out of obligation, but liberation. As I stepped into the car and the door shut behind me, I knew this wasn't just an ending. It was a beginning. I now live at Willow Haven, a safe house Clara runs, hidden in a quiet lakeside town in Vermont. It's far from the noise, away from the prying eyes, and most importantly, nowhere on the map for anyone named Blake. At first, I couldn't sleep. The dark no longer carried footsteps, but the marks in my mind remained. I would wake up in the middle of the night, cold sweat on my forehead, fists clenched as if ready to block an invisible blow. But Clara was patient. So were the other women living with me. They didn't ask too much, didn't pity me. They just shared quiet tea, knowing glances, and nods that needed no words. 3 weeks later, Clara handed me a flyer. "There's a storefront for rent in town," she said. "Subsidized for startups. You said you love books, right?" I looked at the flyer, then at her. "No one opens bookstores anymore," I said with a sad smile. "Everyone reads on their phones." "That's why it needs someone willing to be different," Clara said. "And that someone is you." The idea of opening a bookstore cafe was vague at first, but during those quiet nights jotting down pieces of memory, I realized words had once saved me. The pages of books were where I hid when Richard made the world outside suffocating. We named the shop Moor and Maple, a nod to the swamp I once felt trapped in, and the maple tree, symbol of seasons changing. Clara co-invested, and I took charge of the design and concept. Using my old graphic design skills, I hand-drew the sign, designed the menu, and curated the reading corner. We set aside 10% of profits each month to help fund more safe houses. Every book sold became a chance for another woman to rewrite her own story. On opening day, my hands trembled as I pulled back the curtain from the front window, not because I feared failure, but because I'd never dared stand in the light. Ethan and my niece Emma were our first customers. Emma's 10 now, wild blonde hair and clutching a copy of Harry Potter like a treasure. "Auntie, do you have cookies here?" she asked, eyes sparkling. I bent down, smiling. "We've got chocolate chip and peanut butter." She hugged me tight, then whispered, "Daddy says you're the bravest person he's ever known." I looked over at Ethan. He stood there, eyes still heavy with the weight of years lost. But between us now wasn't a gap of misunderstanding. It was a bond, forged through a journey of rebirth. After the arrest, Richard was sentenced to 9 years in prison, 7 for financial fraud, and 2 for documented domestic abuse. I was granted a permanent restraining order and legal ownership of my personal assets. What about Samantha? After the trial, she left town, carrying a bitterness I no longer held against her. Everyone's life is a lesson, and I had finished mine. Clara suggested I share my story during the Tuesday night support groups at the cafe, after closing. At first, I refused. I didn't think my trembling voice could help anyone. But then, a woman named Naomi came. She sat quietly in the corner, didn't speak, didn't make eye contact. She reminded me of myself, 1 year ago. I handed her a blank notebook with a note. "If you can't speak yet, write." The following week, Naomi wrote a poem titled "The Room Without Windows." I read it aloud at the group meeting, tears falling without shame. And I knew my healing wasn't just for me anymore. Every day at Moor and Maple was a reminder that I was alive, not just surviving. I got to choose what to read, what music to play, and who to love. And for the first time in years, I chose myself. As autumn dropped its first leaves onto the quiet street where Moor and Maple stood, I completed the final draft of the book I had once been too afraid to write. A memoir with no photo, no flashy cover, just raw, unflinching slices of life behind a closed door. I chose the pen name E.L. Carter, a combination of my mother's middle name and my grandmother's maiden name. Women who were quiet but strong, whose resilience ran in my veins. The title of the book, "Don't Knock Unless You Mean to Enter," a phrase Richard once said as a threat, which I turned into a challenge against every assumption. At first, I only shared the manuscript on a forum for survivors of domestic abuse. No expectations, no hopes. But within 2 weeks, over 3,000 downloads, comments flooded in. I thought I was the only one. "Thank you for giving me courage," I sobbed at chapter 3. A few weeks later, an editor from a small independent press emailed me with one line. "We don't need your real name, just your real story." Clara was the first to know. She placed a hand on my shoulder as I read her the final chapter. The moment I sent the message, echo at 2:17 a.m. I thought I survived because of me, I said. No, Clara shook her head gently. You survived because you knew you weren't alone. That's why, when Clara made the offer, I didn't hesitate long. Violet, she said one sunny afternoon. The organization is expanding. 3 new safe houses will open in the southern part of the state, and we need a coordinator. I blinked. You mean me? You've walked that road, she said. Women will believe you. They'll see themselves in you. They need someone who doesn't just understand with logic, but with scars. I sat silently for a long moment. What about the bookstore? I asked. It'll still run, and you can choose your level of involvement. We don't force anyone, but Violet, you're no longer someone who needs rescuing. You're the one they're looking for. I said yes on a Tuesday night, after a support group meeting at Moore and Maple. A woman named Kendra, only her second time attending, stood up in the circle and said, I read a book last week by someone named E.L. Carter, and I think that's why I'm here tonight. I looked at Clara. She just smiled. I nodded. 1 month later, I officially became a regional coordinator for Safe Steps, the network of safe houses founded by Clara. I work part-time, overseeing outreach, training volunteers, and especially designing programs to help women rebuild life skills after leaving abusive environments. I no longer see myself as a shadow. I'm someone who stepped into the light and reached back to bring others with me. One day, while organizing bookshelves, I found an old drawing Ethan had sent from our parents' attic. 2 kids holding hands, with scribbled red capes and the words in crayon, Super Ethan and Mighty Violet. I sat on the floor, holding the drawing, and laughed between the bookcases. That little Mighty Violet, after all those years of silence, had finally spoken. And this time, she wasn't speaking just for herself. I don't know how far the future will take me, but I know this. Every step I take now is an act of healing, for me, and for those still finding their way out of the dark. My apartment sits just above the Moore and Maple bookstore. Just a short walk up the small wooden staircase behind the counter leads to my front door. It's not big, but it holds the morning sunlight, the scent of warm cinnamon waffles, and quiet evenings filled only with the soft rustle of turning pages. I used to think I needed a big house to feel safe, but it turns out all I really needed was a door that locks from the inside and a soul free to breathe in its own space. That evening, after closing the shop and seeing the last of the support group out the door, I climbed the stairs under the warm light. In my hand was a steaming cup of peppermint tea and a notebook filled with heartfelt words from Naomi, Kendra, and a newcomer named Haley. Fresh out of a controlling marriage, I opened my door, set the tea by the window, then turned back and locked the door. Click. The sound of the lock was crisp and clean, like a ritual. But to me, it was the sound of freedom. I had spent thousands of nights in a luxurious house, but always fell asleep feeling watched. Now, each night in this small space is a quiet reminder. I no longer have to shrink in fear. I am the one who controls this door. This life. The next morning, Ethan stopped by with Emma and a box of crispy waffles. Dad said today's a read books and eat waffles kind of day, she beamed. We sat by the bookstore window, watching red leaves float gently down to the yard. I read the first chapter of The Secret Garden to Emma, while Ethan quietly shelved books in the new children's section. Do you think you'll keep writing? Ethan asked as we cleaned up. I paused, then nodded. Not for me. For those who haven't dared to write their own stories yet. He smiled. You've changed, but you're still the Violet I've always admired. I looked out to the street. A group of school kids passed by, laughing. A young mother carried her child into the cafe across the street. Life was moving on, and I was finally part of it, not standing on the sidelines. That evening, I opened my laptop and began writing a blog post for the Safe Steps website. The title, Silence Isn't Peace. I wrote from everything I had lived through. The averted eyes, the half-held sighs, the bruises hidden under long sleeves, and all the times I told myself, it'll get better, just to keep enduring. I wrote for the women sitting in their cars outside the house, too afraid to walk in. I wrote for the men mocked for saying I was abused. I wrote for the children who witnessed things they never should have seen and grew up scared. Like Emma once asked me, "Aunt Violet, why do you always look over your shoulder?" The post ended with a message. If you see a sign, don't look away. If you hear something, don't assume you imagined it. If you're living in silence, know that someone is listening. To you, reading this in the middle of a long night. You are not alone. I clicked post. Then I shut my laptop, poured myself a glass of lemon water, and stepped onto the tiny balcony just big enough for one wicker chair. I sat, quietly watching the stars. No one could stop me from looking at the sky anymore. No one could force me to close the curtains. At last, I had made the journey from darkness to light, not alone, but alongside hundreds, thousands of other women, still searching for the key to lock the trauma behind them, and to open another door, the one to freedom. If you're reading this and see yourself in any part of this story, please don't stay silent. Reach out for help. Send a message, say a word, take one small step. Because just like I did at 2:17 a.m. that morning, one single act can change the rest of your life. Violet did it, and you can too. Violet's story isn't just about escaping abuse. It's living proof of the power of courage and timely support. In real life, there are millions like Violet quietly enduring behind closed doors. But a single message, a hug, or just one person willing to listen can be the light that saves them. Remember, silence isn't peace. If you suspect someone needs help, don't turn away. Your small action could change an entire life. What do you think about Violet's journey and the choices she made? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful life and family stories to come.